Welcome back to the Steel City Sports Podcast. So it's been a long time since I've done an actual long format podcast on the channel. We did a couple last year. So I do kind of want to bring this back this season where, typically my videos have a structure to it, whether it's my predictions or rankings or reactions to trades. This is going to be more so of like a long format podcast style discussion. And in today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to be ranking every NFL team based off of the first 6 weeks of the NFL season and basically just lay out the landscape of the NFL as we talk about every team. So this is going to be a longer video for sure. Definitely strap in here, get a snack. Maybe if you're going for a long drive, you can listen to this. But yeah, I'm going to be rambling a lot in this one. So like I said, we're ranking every NFL team based off the first 6 weeks. So starting off at 32, I have the Cleveland Browns. To me is the biggest disaster in the National Football League right now, and it's not even remotely close. When you look at, they have the worst player in the NFL, Deshaun Watson, who has been by far not just the worst player, he's the worst starting quarterback. But when you factor in the contract situation, that is to me why. Because we're not just talking about their records. Like their record sucks on its own at 1-5. But I'm also talking about just the overall team situation. Like how is the organization being run at this point in time? Like what's going on within the locker room? I'm factoring all that into this ranking. We're talking about like the landscape of all these teams. So the on-the-field play is already a mess by itself. And that would already warrant me putting them this low on the list. But on top of that, they have the worst contract situation, not only in the NFL, but in the planet, right now. In terms of every sport on the planet right now, there's not a worse contract tied to a sports team right now than Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Because if you were to cut Deshaun Watson right now, let's just say they flat out cut him. He's on the open market as a free agent. I know a single team wouldn't sign him even for a league minimum, like for $1 million, like what happened with Russell Wilson. No team in the NFL would do that because he sucks as a player. Like we said, he's the worst starter in the league. But on top of that, you get all the baggage. He's a terrible person. His teammates don't like him. His coaches don't like him. He doesn't care about the game. It's pretty clear. So when you factor in the fact they're 1-5, they have the worst contract ever in the history of sports, and their team is just kind of a dumpster fire right now. They got rid of a really good player in Amari Cooper, which kind of just, for me, signalizes that they're throwing in the towel on this season. I will say, though, going forward for the Browns, I hope they don't take away like the wrong message here and fire Stefanski. I think that would be a dreadful mistake, firing Kevin Stefanski. This is not his fault whatsoever. Look at what he did last year with Joe Flacco, won Coach of the Year last year despite all that turnover at the quarterback position. So I really hope that he isn't the one who takes the fall for the Browns being such a shit show this year, because he's as a Steelers fan, I would like to see it. I'd like him out of the division. But just from like an unbiased perspective looking at the Browns, if I'm a Browns fan and they fire Stefanski, that would probably be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I mean, this is one of the most embarrassing franchises on the planet right now for how they've handled this whole situation. Their defense isn't even good. Like last year, at least they had that. It's like they were really shaky at quarterback, but they could rely on their defense. They had the number one pass defense last year. That's gone. Their defense sucks this year. Garrett hasn't been very productive. Like we said, they had traded away Amari. There's just nothing really going positive for the Cleveland Browns right now, and that's why they're in last place. Moving on to 31. We have the Carolina Panthers. So, yeah, we all know that they're a disaster as well. Not as big a disaster because they're not paying their bad quarterback that amount of money, but they still drafted a bust number 1 overall with Bryce Young. That's pretty clear. I don't get why there's people out there still defending Bryce Young. It's not like it's like Anthony Richardson where he missed like a big chunk of his rookie year. It's like, guys, we saw him play his entire rookie year. He didn't impress in not one of those games. Like, I'm not asking him to be fucking Tom Brady in year 1, but you didn't even see a glimpse of anything from Bryce Young. I think he's too small. He's not athletic. He has a bad arm. This is just a product of he looked really good on a really good Bama team where obviously at Alabama you have everything. You have an incredible O-line. You have the best receivers in the nation, good running backs. You had Saban. Like, of course he was going to look good at Alabama, but then you put him in an NFL situation with a bad line, not great weapons, a Last year, obviously, the coaching situation was a disaster. Frank Reich fired before his first year's done. Yeah, I mean, when everything isn't catered to you, you're going to fail. And, I don't even know if he would work if you'd put him on like an elite team. Like, let's just say right now, let's pick a random team, the Lions. They got a lot going good for them. They got a great O-line, good weapons, best running back tandem. Let's say you just swap out Jared Goff for Bryce Young right now. You're telling me you would have confidence with Bryce Young on the Lions? I wouldn't, because like I said, bad arm, too small, not athletic enough. So you pair that with the fact that they're 1-5 as well, similar to the Cleveland Browns. Their owner's probably the worst in the NFL right now. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's a very bleak situation going forward. I mean, at least with them, they have the silver lining of we're going to get a high-end pick. So if it's me, I'm definitely drafting another quarterback. For me, Bryce Young is done. But the way that this team's been managed over the past couple of years, how can you have any faith in this team going forward, even if they were to land the top QB prospect? Like, I just think they are such a mess, and it's going to be a long, long time before they're ever relevant. At 30, we have the New England Patriots. They're 1-5 like these other bottom teams as well. I will give them a bit of a silver lining, a bit of positivity we saw in their last game where Drake May looked really good with his first NFL start. He threw 3 touchdowns in his first NFL game. So that's at least a bit of positivity you have with the Patriots is Drake May looks good, but that's kind of it. Everything else about this team sucks. The line's bad. The weapons suck. The defense is hit or miss. The coach, I think, is still kind of in over his head. It's just not a good team. I mean, at least like with them, there's some stability with ownership. Like, I trust Robert Kraft a million times more than I trust David Tepper or the Browns owner. But it's going to be a while before this team's good. They just need, a lot of stuff. And that's fine. I mean, you dominated the league for 2 decades. It's okay if you suck for a while, and they're clearly in the midst of that rebuild right now. It's just going to take a while. It's not like with the Browns and the Panthers, I literally view them as just from a structural standpoint, a fucking disaster. I don't view the Patriots as that. They're not structurally a mess. Like, their organization is well ran. It's just the team isn't very good from a personnel standpoint. So I have a lot more confidence in them going forward, throughout the next couple of years. They just need to build their roster up. The real question is their GM and head coach the right guy to be making those decisions, building this team up? We shall see. And obviously Drake May is the biggest factor. Is he going to continue to play like that? But yeah, just like I said, from a team perspective, they're not good, so that's why they're this low. 29, the Jacksonville Jaguars, another 1-5 team. I would be very surprised if their head coach holds on to his job past this year. It would be very, very surprising to me. And I like Doug Peterson, but when you look at his resume throughout his coaching tenure, you take it like the Super Bowl year obviously was kind of an outlier because every other year of his career coaching, he's never won over 10 games. I think 17, obviously they won the Super Bowl, but 18 and 19, they didn't crack 10 wins. Then last year with Jacksonville, they didn't crack 10 wins. And this, actually, he's been in Jacksonville, this is year 3. So his first 2 years in Jacksonville, they never sniffed over double-digit wins or anything like that. So I just don't think he's like an elite head coach. I think he's good. I think he was kind of right place, right time with that Eagles team. Let's be honest, that was a very, very stacked Eagles team. Nick Foles just went on the most insane run you've ever seen. So it's like, obviously you should get a lot of credit. You should get a lot of leeway for beating Bill Belichick in a Super Bowl, but I think it's just clear at this point in time, this is what Doug Peterson is. He is a mediocre head coach at best, and I think he's going to take the fall for the Jags being a dumpster fire this year. Even though it's not 100% his fault, I think this is a pretty bad roster, and I think we all kind of overlooked that going into the season. At least I did, because I was still kind of pointing back to the fact that, hey, Trevor Lawrence, year 2 was really good, won a playoff game, and then year 3, before he got hurt, they were 8-3 and had the 1 seed in the AFC. So I think that stuff kind of led me to overlook a lot of the problems with this team. Particularly the current rendition of the roster is just not very good. And I think the way that the Lawrence's contract is set up right now is basically he has to carry this team or they don't have a shot. Trevor Lawrence has to play perfect, and he's just not good enough to do that. Now, I've made this comparison in the past. He kind of reminds me a lot of Jared Goff. Jared Goff on bad teams, like especially his rookie year with that bad Rams team with Fisher, was a fucking mess. But whenever you put stuff around Jared Goff, he looked really good. They got to a Super Bowl. I kind of think of Trevor Lawrence in that vein. I don't think he's as good as Jared Goff in the NFL. But, if we going back to that comparison I made with like Bryce Young, like if we swap Trevor Lawrence out for Jared Goff on the Lions, I don't think you're going to see that big of a noticeable drop-off in the Lions offense. I make that point to say I think Trevor Lawrence is a good NFL player. I still think he's a good, like, slightly above average starter in the NFL at that position, but he's just not elite, and that is what he's being paid to be, is elite. The way this team is set up is for Trevor Lawrence to be Superman and carry them, and he's just simply not good enough to do that, and they're going to be drafting really high as well. So next up I have at 28, the Tennessee Titans. They're currently sitting at 1-4. A very frustrating team because on paper they have a lot of talent, particularly defensively. Like, their defense has actually been pretty solid this year. It's held up pretty well. Like, their defense should have won them games. It's just their offense has been so putridly bad because of Will Levis. Will Levis, you can argue, has been a bottom 3 starter in the NFL this year at the quarterback position. We know Deshaun's there. We know Bryce Young's there. We know a couple other guys, but you can really argue Will Levis has been that bad. He is like single-handedly, just all on his own, costed them games, particularly week 1 against the Bears, that game against the Jets, even this past week. I mean, he doesn't work. And I don't get why the Titans are still starting him. Like, I'm not saying Mason Rudolph is like, a fucking MVP or anything, but you have a much better chance of winning a game whenever Rudolph's at the helm. He's not going to single-handedly cost you the game like Levis is. So, and that's kind of why they beat the Dolphins. Their one win on the year is because they subbed out Will Levis for Mason Rudolph. So that's kind of head-scratching me, is why are they still starting Will Levis? Like, why did he start this past week in that game? I don't really understand that. So for me, for the Titans going forward, if they want to have even a shot, I would throw Mason out there because, like I said, on paper, this is a good team. Like, they have weapons, they have running backs, they have a solid defense. This should be a lot better than a 1-4 team. We know why they're 1-4. It's because Will Levis has single-handedly given the games away. So, like I said, throw Mason out there. He gives you an actual chance to win the game, but I think for this year, they've already kind of dug themselves too far in a hole. They're definitely a team that I think is going to be drafting a QB regardless of where they land in the draft order. 27, we have the Miami Dolphins. Obviously been a very disappointing year due to Tua's injury. I think it's very safe to say if Tua hadn't gotten hurt that they'd be really good right now. Now, I will say for the Dolphins that they did look really bad in that Bills game before Tua got hurt. Tua did throw 3 picks in that game before he got injured. So there's clearly, Tua being paid that amount of money is definitely an issue because I don't think he's good enough to warrant that type of contract. But at the same time, it's like, what did you want the Dolphins to do? Like, they made the playoffs back-to-back years. It's hard to kind of move off a guy, especially when he's putting up big numbers in this offense. But yeah, I mean, there's not really a whole lot to talk about here because anytime your starter goes down, I don't care if you're the Chiefs, I don't care if you're the Ravens, I don't care if you're the Browns. Actually, the Browns is a bad example. I don't know, pick any random team. Anytime your starting quarterback gets hurt, you're going to be pretty bad. I mean, that's just the case of the sport. That's why all these penalties and stuff are, to protect the quarterback position because it's just a bad product and the team is going to suck whenever the starter's out. So the Dolphins, yeah, I don't have really much to say because it's all pretty obvious why they're not winning games. They don't have a quarterback. So hopefully Tua will be back. I think it's pretty clear he's going to be back this season. It's just a matter of when is he going to play again. I've heard rumors as early as week 8, but it's not been solidified that he's for sure going to do that. So we don't know. Moving forward, though, at 26, I have the Los Angeles Rams. So this is a team that has dealt with the most injuries, especially early on. It felt like after just one game, they were decimated by injuries. Puka Nacua went on IR. Their basically entire offensive line got hurt. So right off the gate, they just really had a disadvantage with their injuries. And I think that they have really done a good job of at least staying competitive. They haven't been winning games, obviously, but they've at least been competitive in the games. When they lost to the Packers, they were at least in that game. They obviously beat the 49ers with all the injuries. So I still think it's a good team. If they were fully healthy, I think the Rams would still be a playoff level team. And there's still, I think, a glimmer of hope because we know Stafford, when he gets hot, is one of the best players in the league. And we know that Sean McVay is an elite head coach. So if you start getting some of these weapons back for Matt Stafford, which I think is going to start happening pretty quick here. I mean, Cooper Kupp is rumored to be back this upcoming week. I don't know. Hasn't been solidified. But the second you get Stafford's weapons back with Cooper and kind of combine their names there, with Cooper and Puka, they can win any game. We saw that last year. They went on a stretch the back half of last year where they were the hottest team in the NFL. They won like 5 or 6 straight, something like that. They almost beat the Ravens, who were the most dominant regular season team last year. So the Rams, I'm not completely writing their season off just yet, but they are certainly in a very deep hole at 1-4 with how the NFC's looking right now. I'm not completely writing off their season just yet, though, just because they have looked competitive despite the injuries. At 25, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, they're in all the headlines right now after trading away Davante Adams. And that has to go down as like one of the worst trades of recent memory, them getting Davante, because what did they give up, like 2 firsts and 2 seconds? I could be completely wrong about that. Let me know down in the comments, but I know it was a lot of draft capital they gave up for Davante for basically two seasons plus whatever it was, like 3 or 4 games this year. So you're looking at 2 seasons and 4 games of Davante for all that draft capital. It's just a mess, and I think it's really a clear indication of what the Raiders are, and that is just really a dumpster fire. They, to me, feel like a team that just really doesn't know what the fuck they're doing in terms of how they're managed, how they're ran. I think Antonio Pierce was a really impulsive hire at head coach. We've seen time after time, countless times in the NFL, where an interim comes in and the team gets hot because there's like new energy. They want to play good for the new guy, and they look a lot more competitive. That's exactly what happened last year with the Raiders after Josh McDaniel was fired. And so they were like, hey, well, we had an above 500 record with Pierce. Let's just go with him. The players like him. I mean, I told you guys at the time that was just a terrible hire. When you just look at in division alone, look at the other coaches in this division. Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, and Sean Payton. You are at a astronomical coaching disadvantage in every single one of those matchups, and that's just in division. So for me, it feels like a very Raiders hire, very impulsive. I like him. I think he'd be a really good coordinator. But in terms of the guy running the show, he to me feels like he's in over his head. And the team on paper, just not very good. We all knew that coming into the year. Gardner Minshew's already been benched. Your best offensive player by far has been traded already. If I'm them, I'm just having a fire sale, just tearing down this team. Max Crosby, I would trade because you can get a shit ton. I know he embodies like the whole Raiders culture, and fans are going to cry when he gets traded, but it's like, what good is it if you have this sweet pass rusher and you're winning 4 or 5 games every year? Like, what does it fucking matter? It doesn't. For me, if I'm the Raiders, like I said, every decent player they have, not named Brock Bowers, would be off the team for as much draft capital as possible because this team just needs a lot of work. So clean house with this team. And if it were me, I'd fire Pierce as well, just because I would have never hired him in the first place. Next up, we have at 24, the Arizona Cardinals sitting at 2-4. Just one of the most frustrating teams in the NFL. They're so inconsistent, and it really relies on Kyler Murray. I'm a big fan of Kyler. I've made no point of trying to hide that on this channel. I think I've been biased towards the Cardinals because Kyler is my favorite non-Steeler in the NFL, but I have to be honest, just because I like a guy doesn't mean I'm going to be like blind and not tell the truth on him. He's one of the most wildly inconsistent players in the NFL. You don't know what you're getting from Kyler on a game-to-game basis. I think in a vacuum, he has some of the highest talent. Like if you're just looking at his talent tree in terms of arm strength, his mobility, his accuracy, like if you're just looking at all that, he has some of the best talent from a pure, like if you're ranking all the players in the NFL from a talent perspective, he would be very, very high on that list. But like we said, it's just too wildly inconsistent at this point in time, and the roster's not good at all. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to miss time with a concussion. This team just needs so much, and they're so far away in terms of being like a legitimate playoff team because their defense really, outside of Budda Baker, is nobody's. Their head coach, I still don't like that hire, particularly when you have such a unique offensive player in Kyler. I would like to have an offensive mind paired with him. Even though I had my gripes about Cliff Kingsbury, at least he was an offensive guy, and he had some success with Kyler early on. They made the playoffs together. I never liked that Gannon hire. I gave him credit. He was a little better than I thought, but still, to me, just feels like a random hire, particularly when their defense isn't that great. It kind of feels like a directionless team to me, really. If I'm them, though, obviously my biggest concern would be their pass rush because they have one of the least productive pass rushing units in the NFL. So in the draft, I'd be targeting the top pass rusher, probably James Pierce. 23, I have the New Orleans Saints sitting at 2-4. Obviously got off to the hottest start of the NFL season at 2-0, putting up 47 in week 1 and 44 in week 2. But since then, they've gone on to lose their last 4 games straight. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Saints because if you've been listening to me this season, we've talked about the Saints a lot. I was never a believer in them. At the end of the day, Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, you guys have heard my spiel a million times. I just think that the 2 teams they beat were not very good teams. The Panthers, we just ranked at 31. The Cowboys are not. It's not going to be too much longer till you hear the Cowboys come up. So they crushed 2 bad teams, or mediocre if you want to say the Cowboys are that. But ever since then, they've been a mess. And now Derek Carr's hurt. Spencer Rattler did not look good in his first NFL game with 2 picks. Bad coach. I just don't think it's a very good team. And it's not really that surprising to me that they have gone on this losing streak. 22, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Definitely one of the most disappointing starts for the Bengals this year because this was a team that I predicted to be a playoff team this year. And as it looks right now, they have a lot of work to do to get to that spot. They are at 2-4 in a tough division. I will give the Bengals this credit, though. At least Burrow is not the problem. Joe Burrow has been incredible this year. You can argue Joe Burrow has been playing at an MVP level this season. Jamar Chase has still been extremely productive. It's just their defense is so dreadfully bad, and that's why when I made my I think a week ago, I made that video, the Controversy Countdown, where we were looking at teams that were really disappointing this year. The reason why the Bengals were on there is because it's heartbreaking to have your quarterback play so good. Because that's usually the winning recipe in the NFL is, hey, if our quarterback is sweet, we're going to win games. Joe Burrow's legit playing at an an MVP level right now, and yet you're 2-4. It's very frustrating, but I will say this about the Bengals. In the Joe Burrow era, they always get off to slow starts. That was always the case with the Bengals in years prior. They were doing it last year. They got off to a rough start, and then they started to put it together, and then Burrow got hurt the year before that. Even their Super Bowl year, they got off to a slow start. So I will say that about the Bengals. That has always kind of been their MO in the Burrow era, is a slow start, then they start to put things together. I don't know if that's possible, though, this year because their defense is so bad. So we will see. I still don't think it's officially a done deal with them being a playoff team because, like I said, we have seen them go on runs, but terrible, terrible start to the year for them. 21, we have the Jets. Obviously, in a lot of headlines after landing Davante Adams. If you listen to my video that I put out about the trade with Davante, I said it's a good trade, just looking at it in a vacuum, but I don't think it really moves the needle a whole lot for the Jets because they still have a lot of structural problems with this team. Aaron is still a 40-year-old off an Achilles injury that's mediocre at best. Their O-line is fucking disgracefully bad. Breece Hall's been a disappointment. The defense is supremely overrated, and their coaching staff is a disaster now with Saleh gone. Jeff Ulbrich, to me, does not feel anywhere near the level of an NFL head coach. They have a new interim coordinator. It just really feels like they're doing this. They're throwing this together on the fly. They're a desperate team. I just don't have a whole lot of faith in the New York Jets. I didn't to start off the year, and it doesn't really change my mind a whole lot after they land Davante. I'm glad he got off the Raiders. The Jets are definitely a better team than the Raiders for sure. They can still win 9 wins, in my opinion, at best. But it doesn't really move the needle a whole lot for me, in my opinion. At 20, we're staying in New York with the Giants. I think the Giants have honestly been a little more impressive this year than the Jets have because it's a far less talented team on paper, yet they've been more scrappy than the Jets. They have the same record. And Daniel Jones, He's had moments here and there this season where he's actually played not terrible, which for Daniel Jones is a big deal because last season, before he got hurt, he was fucking an embarrassment. He had a 2-5 or something like that, and maybe 1 his TD interception ratio for last season, I think it was like 2-6 or maybe 1-6. Like, it was terrible. So that's why I had such little faith in the Giants going into this year, especially after losing Saquon. But he's been all right. He's been better than what I thought he'd be, at least. I think Dable has actually done a pretty good job now that he's back in the role of the offensive play caller. And you got a certified stud now with Malik Nabers. I know that he got hurt. I think he's going to be back here pretty soon. That when he's on the field, you're going to be able to stay in any game because he's legitimately that big of a playmaker. Like, if you go back to the Cowboys game when they played Dallas on Thursday Night Football, it was like every single play they were just feeding Malik Nabers, and he was wide open on every play. Like, they almost won that game on the back of Malik Nabers. So they've been a little better. Like, they've been at least kind of competent on offense. I know that Commanders game was really ugly. If they would have had a kicker, they would have won that game. They'd actually have a decent record right now. But, it's at the end of the day, it's Daniel Jones. It's still a very limited team. I still don't really trust the Giants, but I give them credit for being more scrappy this year than I thought they'd be. And Danny Dimes has been all right, I guess. At number 19, we have the Denver Broncos, a team that I was very, very critical on. And it really stems from the fact that I think Sean Payton is a supremely overrated head coach. But I will give him credit. Like, he has had spots this year where he's just stolen games from a scheme perspective. So Sean Payton can still definitely coach. My problem has always been with Sean Payton when people start to put him in the top 10 coaches of all time. Like, shut the fuck up. No, he's not. He had so many stacked teams in New Orleans. He had a Hall of Fame QB in Drew Brees. I think the way you measure coaches is look at them when they have elite quarterbacks. Like, the second Belichick got his guy Brady, rattling off Super Bowls left and right. Reed, the second he got his elite guy, Super Bowl after Super Bowl, they're a dynasty. McVay, when he got his guy in Stafford, immediate, first year, they got a Super Bowl. Well, you look at what happened with Sean Payton. He had Drew Brees for 15 years, and they won 1 Super Bowl. They never got back to the Super Bowl after that. So that's where I get kind of pissed off with Sean Payton, is when people try to put him in all-time great conversations or he's an elite guy. I think he's a really good offensive play caller, but that's kind of it. That's where it ends for me. I don't see him as an all-time guy. But I will give him credit. He has been good in certain spots, particularly that Bucs game. The Bucs coming off of a big win. He was able to really expose them in that game, kind of carve them up with Bo Nix at the helm. Bo Nix has been one of the most wildly up-and-down players this year. I still don't really buy into Bo Nix. I don't think he's that good. But he's had certain spots. The defense has been all right. It's just, to me, the limitations in terms of talent perspective, they're just not a very good football team. That's why I can't rank them any higher. And I think their record is definitely inflated. They're not a 500 team, in my opinion. They are much closer to a 5-win team than they are a 9-win team. So next up, we have at number 18, we have the fabled Dallas Cowboys, sitting at a record of 3-3. Last year, this was the team that I shit on the most, gotten the most arguments over the Cowboys, and that hasn't been the case this year. I haven't been talking about them as much, and I haven't been getting in arguments about them as much, because I think now people are really just starting to realize the stuff I was saying about the Cowboys going into this year was 100% right. I made a video in the offseason with all my list of problems with the Cowboys you can find pretty easily on the channel. And I had a lot of people in the comments telling me how wrong I was and all that. Their defense, it was the best last year. And, their O-line's actually still really good. Well, no, it's not. To both of those. And you can say DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons got hurt. They were bad before those injuries. Their secondary was having a lot of problems before those guys got hurt. Now their defense is just a dreadful mess. Without those two guys, it was already pretty bad. I don't think Mike Zimmer's a good coordinator in the year 2024. If we're talking about 2014, fuck yeah. But it's a different NFL. I think Mike Zimmer's completely outdated. I think Mike McCarthy, clear that I don't think he's going to keep his job. Now, I'm willing to listen on a debate between Mike McCarthy because, obviously he's been extremely disappointing in the playoffs. I think is one of the worst coaches in the league when it comes to clock/game management. I think he's really a moron at that stuff. But, you look at his resume with the Cowboys, Dak has played the best years of his career with McCarthy, particularly last year, and they have won they've gone 3 straight seasons of winning 12 games. So I can kind of see the argument from that perspective of, like, why would we fire McCarthy? Like, we've had a lot of success. We've been disappointed in the playoffs, but, I'm willing to listen to both sides of the debate on McCarthy. I would honestly get rid of him just for the simple fact of, what you have with him. Stable in the regular season, usually dominates the regular season, and then comes up short in the playoffs. But this year, you don't even have the regular season destruction. And this was what I always talked about, I've brought up this year, is that was usually the MO of the Cowboys in the McCarthy-Dak era is, they would always kind of shit their pants when they played the real teams. But anytime they'd play a dog shit team like last year's Commanders or the Giants last year, the Jets last year with Zach Wilson, they would just go out there and fucking curb stomp them. And that's why that's why people always would buy into the big hype with Dallas. That's why now I think people are starting to realize why they're just not a very good team, is because they're having trouble with the bad teams. Like, they should have crushed the Giants on that Thursday night game. It was only a 5-point game. And then they've played the real teams. They got fucking embarrassed by Baltimore, and they got embarrassed by the Lions when they played 2 playoff-level teams. So I don't really know what to say about the Cowboys anymore. Like, everything I've been saying for over a year now on this channel has been 100% right, and I just don't really, it's not interesting for me to talk about the Cowboys anymore because I think everyone kind of now knows what they all are, and they're just too limited. This is the most reliant they've been on Dak. Their line sucks. They have a terrible running game. There's just not a whole lot here with the Cowboys. If this was like, if you took this exact roster and coaching staff and just, let's say they're the Jacksonville Jaguars or they're the Seattle Seahawks, just pick a random team, we wouldn't really talk about them a whole lot. But it's the fact they have the star on the helmet and everyone always hypes them up. That's why we got to spend a lot of time on them. But let's move on to a in-division rival with the Cowboys. At 17, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, sitting at a record of 3-2. To me, they feel to me right now, the Eagles feel like a powder keg. Like, right now, they have the potential to just blow up. With how this team is playing right now, when you look at the roster on paper, this is a very talented Philadelphia Eagles team. However, they're not playing well whatsoever. This is just not a very good football team as they're playing right now. Jalen Hurts has been extremely disappointing. The defense is clearly a massive problem. Their secondary continues to be a big problem. I don't know what to say. Like, they literally have a Pro Bowl roster. I know that they've had injuries for sure, but Jalen was bad before the A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith injuries happened. So they have a Pro Bowl roster. Like, they should be crushing teams. They should have, smacked around the Cleveland Browns at home as 10-point favorites. They almost blew that game. You have Sirianni going through a legit mental crisis right now where he's just having a breakdown. He's yelling at fans. He shaved his head. He's, acting like a literal lunatic right now. So I don't know with the Eagles. They should be a lot better than what they are right now. And it wouldn't be such a mess if the coach wasn't such a mess. If they just had a stable coach. I'm not even saying they need an elite head coach. They just need a stable guy in there who's not a fucking psycho. They'd be fine. I wouldn't have as much criticism about them, but when you have Sirianni at the helm of this organization, I don't know what to do with the Eagles going forward. I really don't. A team I had a lot of high hopes for, a team that I predicted to be the 1 seed in the NFC this year. I had really high hopes for the Eagles because of their roster, and it's just not lived up to that, and I don't really know what the fix is. Even if you fire Sirianni, is that going to fix Jalen? I don't know. Is that going to fix their defensive woes? I don't know. So we'll see about the Eagles. They still have a winning record at this point in time, just barely. We'll see going forward. At number 16, we have the Indianapolis Colts, a team that I picked to make the playoffs this year. The Colts are kind of a difficult one because we know, at least in 2024, Joe Flacco is the better quarterback than Anthony Richardson. So that is definitely disappointing for Colts fans, for people that bought stock in Anthony Richardson like I did. I had very high hopes for him going into this year. That's why I picked them to be a playoff team. And let's be honest, Anthony Richardson was not good this year. He had a couple sweet plays. Week 1, he had arguably the best throw of the entire NFL season. That 60-yard bomb to Pierce, off his back leg, is going to be one of the best highlights from this season. But That's not the NFL. Not every play is going to be like that. And Anthony Richardson really struggles with like the easy plays, the layup plays. Like his accuracy is just bad. And that's something, I don't know if you can fix that. Like really, I think you can change the scheme around, you can scheme guys open and all that, but at the end of the day, if he can't throw to wide open guys, like what are you going to do? So I don't know. I'm not pounding the gavel on Richardson at all because I still think he has incredible traits. He's an incredible athlete. He has a great arm, like a rocket of an arm. But the easy stuff you have to nail. That's why Justin Fields struggled in Chicago, and that's why we're going to talk about him with the Steelers in a second. But you got to keep in mind, Anthony Richardson is still a very young player. Like he's still only like 21, 22 years old. So I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, pounding the gavel on him. He's still got a lot of time. I still have a lot of faith in this coaching staff, Shane Steichen. But in terms of them being a playoff team, I just don't know because the roster's not that great. They've got their own injuries. But Flacco, I think, definitely gives them a better shot going forward, and that's why he's kind of been the guy the past couple weeks. You could make an argument they're kind of playing up AR's injury as an excuse to play Flacco. I don't know. 15, we have Seattle. They got off to an incredible start at 3-0, and then they've gone on a 3-game losing streak. We talked about why they lost to the Niners. I think they just asked too much of Geno, and I don't really understand like the scheme of the offense. To me, it feels like Ryan Grubb doesn't really know what he's doing. Like from a game-to-game basis, he will completely change the philosophy of this team. And I get that. Like you want to be fluid, you want to be changing based on which teams you're playing, but it's like the head coach will come out one day and say, "Hey, let's use Kenneth Walker more. Like he was really good for us against the Lions," and then they give him 11 carries against San Fran. Like I don't know. That's a little weird to me. Is like, what are they doing on offense? Because to me, it's a very clear recipe. You have a very good running back tandem with Walker and Charbonnet. Like, why aren't you leaning more into that? I don't know why you're purposely asking Geno Smith to carry this football team when you don't have to. And I think that's why they lost to the Niners. They asked Geno to do too much. Anytime you ask Geno or any other guy in that tier, like a Goff or a Trevor Lawrence or a Dak or a Tua, anyone in that B-level tier of quarterback, you ask them to throw over 50 times in a football game, you're going to fucking lose. This isn't Josh Allen or Mahomes. So that's something I'd like to see a little more consistently set in stone for this offense is they really need to find their identity. If they're going to keep Geno, they need to really rely more so on running the ball with Seattle. Their defense has been kind of inconsistent up and down. Obviously, they've had a ton of injuries on their defensive line. I still am going to hold on to my take of the Seahawks being a playoff team. I know that looked a lot better after week 3 than it does right now. They were 3-0, but now they're 3-3. I still think that they are, from a roster perspective, very talented, and I believe in their rookie head coach, Mike McDonald. He was really good with the Ravens last year, so I still think they're going to squeak in as a wild card, but they really need to solidify what they are on offense. Number 14, we have the Los Angeles Chargers at 3-2. They've kind of been an under-the-radar team, I feel like, just because they don't have the big flashy plays. But they've been a very strong, consistent type team, kind of like the opposite of Seattle. The Chargers know what they are on offense in terms of their identity, run the ball. That's why J.K. Dobbins was leading the league in NFL. He was leading the NFL in rushing yards for the start of the NFL season. You got Herbert playing really good. You got the defense playing very good. It's kind of a bland style, because they don't have all the big flashy plays and all that, but I think it's a successful recipe. Anytime you're controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides, they have a really good offensive line. They have really good pass rushers. They're not lighting it up right now at 3-2, but Herbert did deal with injuries. He did miss, I think, a game. He came out of the Steelers game as well. So I think it's still not a bad bet right now for the Chargers to be a playoff team. With Harbaugh at the helm, with Herbert, they're just a really solid, well-run team at this point in time. So that's why they're kind of in the spot at 13. Right above them, we have my Pittsburgh Steelers. So obviously, I could ramble about the Steelers for just an hour. There's a lot that I like about this team. There's a lot that I don't like about this team. I will say, though, overall pretty positive. Sitting at 4-2 right now, obviously the Cowboys game was infuriating. The Colts game was infuriating. In my eyes, we should be 6-0. I don't know what the fuck happened in the Colts game where the defense like just forgot how to play. Like that game started off 17-0. AR, before he got hurt, was carving us up on that first drive. And then the Cowboys, Dak was literally trying to give us that game. He had 2 god-awful picks, came down to the very last play of that game. We lost. So in my eyes, we should be 6-0 right now. And that's what I predicted us to be to start off the year. I had us starting off on a very strong start and then kind of after the bye going downhill, but still being a playoff team. I think that's kind of still what we're looking at right now. The defense has been disappointing. It was disappointing in that Colts game for sure. But outside of that game, been a very dominant performance from our defense this year. I still think it's an elite group. TJ Watt, for me, is now leading the Defensive Player of the Year conversations with Hutchinson going down with injury. And Justin Fields, ultimately, I think is the biggest story of the Steelers right now. It's not like Justin Fields has been some MVP or he's a superstar or anything like that, but Justin Fields has come in here and done his job. You know, you look at right now, look at his stats. He has 10 total touchdowns and 1 interception, and that interception was a tipped ball. It's not like he threw just a terrible ball. Like, he's been very efficient. He's done exactly what's been asked of him. He brings an element to this team that we were completely lacking last year, which is his dual threat ability. So I think Fields has played fine. Like, there's rumblings right now that Tomlin might swap him out for Russ. Why? Like, if we're 2-4, the offense is terrible, I could kind of get it there. But we're 4-2, and we just hung 32 on the Raiders. Like, why would you switch him out now? Hopefully it's just, like, Tomlin playing tricks on the Jets. I don't know. But right now, I'm like... This is kind of what I thought we'd be. Like, it's not like I think we're going to be a Super Bowl contender or anything, but we're a pretty good team. Like, we can stay in any game with our defense, and Fields just has to kind of run the simple offense of look at the 1-2 check down. If those aren't open, then go run for the first. And especially that's going to be a lot better when Najee performs like he did in the Raider game. He had his best game of the season against the Raiders. We need more of that from Najee for sure. So... it's not a great team, but it's not a bad team. Like, it's exactly what I thought we would be to start off this season. And if Tomlin does choose to bench Fields for Russ, then I'm going to come on here and do a rant, and I'm going to be pretty pissed off. Even though I'm someone who wanted Russ to start off the season, I can't ignore what I've seen. Like, Fields has objectively been good with the Steelers. Not great, not elite, not an MVP, but he's been good. He's done his job. He's won us games. So I will come on here and do a fiery rant if Tomlin does make that decision to start Russ against the Jets. Number 12, we have the Chicago Bears. Very up and down to start off the year, but they've really found their groove. I know it's against 2 bad teams, the Panthers and the Jags, but they fucking crushed those 2 teams. Like, it wasn't even remotely close against either of those teams. And that's what you like to see, especially from a rookie quarterback, is he is really building his confidence. He's gotten better in basically every game this season. And I think, like, I've talked about this, if you listen to my, like, week-by-week reactions, is the reason why he's looking better is because their run game has actually developed now. Like, DeAndre Swift pulled his head out of his ass and is actually now playing really good football. He was the worst running back, like, starting running back, arguably, in the NFL through the first 3 weeks of the season. He's been really good the last 3 games, and that's why their offense looks a lot better. They're not so Caleb-reliant, and Caleb is just running the offense very well, especially against the Jags. He had 4 touchdowns, 2 to Kmet, 2 to Keenan Allen. Like, they're starting to look exactly like what I said they would be going into this year, and that is a playoff team. They look like a playoff team right now to me, just based off of how Caleb is really starting to come into his own. It's a very talented team. The defense has been very solid. The coaching staff, I think, is improving as the year goes on. A lot of positive things to say about the Bears right now. Number 11 is the 49ers. They got off to a really slow start. They've had a ton of injuries, but I think they're kind of coming back on the map here, especially after beating the Seahawks. I know they only won by 12 in that game, but if you watched that game, it wasn't really that competitive. Like, the Niners were controlling that game. And Brock Purdy has been the biggest story for me by far, because everyone always wants to talk about, oh, he has all these great players, and we know that. But he's been good this year, even when Debo was out, even when Trent was out, and obviously McCaffrey hasn't played a single snap. So, that's the one thing that still kind of pisses me off, is at this late date of Week 6 in 2024, there's still people out there that are Brock Purdy deniers. It's not that I'm some Brock Purdy fanboy or a 49ers fan. Like, I don't give a fuck about the Niners. I don't care or I don't hate them. I don't care about them. Like, I'm a Steelers fan. So I'm not saying this because I'm in love with Brock Purdy. He's just a good player. Like, I don't know how at this point in time you can still be a denier of Purdy. After all the injuries, he still looked good. I feel like if you're still a Purdy denier, you just don't really know what the fuck you're talking about at this point in time. And I will debate that with anyone down in the comments because he's just good. He's just a good player. It's not controversial. Like, if he was picked in the 3rd round as opposed to being the last pick, everyone would be saying what I'm saying right now. So, yeah, Purdy's been really good. And they're going to get more and more healthy as the year goes on. There's even a chance McCaffrey could be back. They're going to be good. I still think the Niners, even though they're 3-3, I still think it's hard to bet against them in the NFC right now. Like, obviously, I have NFC teams ranked above them at this current point in time. But going forward, if I had to pick a favorite of the NFC, how can you pick against the Niners? Like, they have been a juggernaut in this conference for half a decade now. And it's kind of hard to pick against that once they get the full strength health-wise. And they're doing that every week. At 10... I think this year's biggest surprise last year was Houston. This year it's Washington. The Washington Commanders, for me right now, are a top 10 team in the NFL because Jayden Daniels is that guy. Now, they got a lot of problems on this team. I still think their defense is really bad. Like, their defense is really, really bad. But Jayden Daniels is going to keep them in any game because that guy is fucking electrifying. He's easily a top 10 quarterback already. It's just kind of fascinating, like back-to-back years where the 2nd overall pick is the one who hits early on. Like last year was CJ, this year it's Jayden. And that's why last year Houston was the big surprise team. This year it's Washington because they just found their guy at quarterback. When you get a guy that dynamic, just that good early on, you're going to be a really good team. And the thing that's really surprised me about Jayden is his efficiency. We all knew he had the incredible physical attributes. We knew he had the deep ball, but the efficiency, that's like what we just talked about a couple minutes ago with Anthony Richardson. It's like he struggles with the easy ones. Like he can throw the bombs, but he struggles with like the little layup ones. Like his efficiency just sucks. That ain't the case with Jayden. He's the total package. He can run. He can throw the deep ball. He can complete the short game checkdowns. He's just an elite player really quickly, and I think it's not hyperbolic to say he's a front runner in the MVP case. Not the front runner, but he's a front runner. I would say he's at least a top 3 candidate right now in the MVP race. So maybe I'll have to make an updated MVP ladder because Jayden is certainly in that conversation for me. Number 9, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So their loss, I mean, obviously the Broncos loss was really disappointing, but outside of that, you had the Atlanta loss. I don't really take too much away from the Bucs in that one because it went to overtime. That was just a shootout, go-either-way type game. But outside of those two, they've been one of the best teams in the NFL. That's undeniable. Like the first week against Washington, Baker was the best statistical quarterback of week 1. This past week against the Saints, I know Baker was really struggling in that one. He still had 3 picks, but they put up 51 points on what people think is a credible defense with the Saints. So Tampa, to me, they're humming. And once they get fully healthy on defense, they're going to be a real problem. And they're already starting to get some of their guys back on defense, particularly Winfield, who's arguably, one of the best safeties in the league right now. So as long as their defense continues to get their guys back from injury, that offense is fucking legit right now. I think you have the best wide receiver tandem in football right now with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They have a good line. They have good running backs. Baker is playing legitimately at an MVP level. This team's really good. It's going to be a really tough out to beat Tampa. But right above them at number 8, I have the Falcons. Yeah, so same division. If you go back to my predictions, I did pick Atlanta to win this division. I said it'd come down to these 2 teams. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a really tough prediction. They're the 2 best teams in this division. And I was going to put Tampa over them, but I was like, then that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because when they played, Atlanta won. So I might like Tampa's roster better, but it would be kind of dumb of me to put them over Atlanta because Atlanta just beat them. So, yeah, Kirk Cousins playing incredible right now. He's doing, like, exactly what this offense is needed. It's just a playmaker guy to come in there and just get the ball to their highly drafted guys. With Drake London having a great year, Darnell Mooney's having a great year. Kyle Pitts has even had spots here and there. I still don't really get Bijan. Like, he finally had a big breakout game this past week against Carolina. But up until that point, kind of disappointing. Their defense has been good. It's just a good football team. Like from a roster perspective, from an on-the-field perspective, they've got playmakers on this team on both sides of the ball. Just a really good football team. For me, they're a lock to make the playoffs regarding injury. Excuse me. Number 7, I have the Green Bay Packers. I still think, there's a couple guys you can definitely argue for in terms of who's the coach of the year this year. Definitely, I think Kevin O'Connell is probably the favorite. But for me, it's Matt LaFleur. Like, what Matt LaFleur did in the 2 games without Jordan Love, to me, is so impressive. To take, look back at how bad Malik Willis was, his very small sample size in Tennessee. He didn't look like an NFL player. And then the 2 games Matt LaFleur has Malik Willis, they won both those games. Like, that to me is alone putting him in the coach of the year conversation. And then Jordan Love has 2 out of his 3 games, not very good, but he finally, I think, had a big bounce back game against the Cardinals. It's like Jordan Love, I think he's finally back to what he was last year. It just took him a while to get back into that form, but Jordan Love was incredible against the Cardinals. So I think Jordan Love has officially arrived back on the map. They have a good roster, good coaching staff. There's just a lot to like with Green Bay. I think they're going to be one of the toughest outs in the playoffs. Number 6, though, sticking in division, we have the Detroit Lions at 4-1 right now. Obviously riding high after just kicking in the teeth of the Dallas Cowboys. Not a real surprise that they're this dominant. To me, like I've said time after time, to me the Lions remind me of like a younger version of what the 49ers have been, where they just have playmakers in every unit of their team. They have the best running back tandem in the NFL. They have arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. The emergence of Jameson Williams really unlocks another component of their offense. It does suck, though, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson. That is a complete heartbreaker. That really does lower my expectations for this team. Like, they're still really good. They're still an elite team. I still put them here at number 6, but that is just a fucking backbreaker, losing a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, who was leading in Defensive Player of the Year. Now he is going to miss the entire season. That really, really is a devastating blow. But I think they're just so talented at every other position that they're going to be fine. It'd be a whole lot better, obviously, if he was there. But they're really good. No one's surprised by that, I don't think. Now we're moving into the top 5. Number 5, we have the Buffalo Bills. So through the first 3 weeks of the season, Josh Allen was by far and away the favorite for MVP, in my opinion. Now it's definitely gone down because he has struggled. That Ravens game, I don't put it all on him, but he wasn't great in that one. The Texans game was kind of ugly, but they got back on track with a good win over the Jets. Kind of a ugly game to watch due to the penalties, but they're back on track, and they just landed Amari Cooper. Like, that is such an incredible get, to get a guy the caliber of Amari Cooper just for a 3rd-round pick. Like, when you look at the offense, he can be like their reliable number 1 guy, and you can have Keon Coleman play more of that like George Pickens style, where he's like the 50-50 ball, like a real red zone threat. But their true like number 1 target guy, Amari Cooper. Like, look at how good Amari was last year with Joe Flacco. Like, this is by far and away the best quarterback that Amari's ever had. So the Bills' offense, I think, is going to be, definitely a lot better with Amari, more consistent at least. The defense still kind of worries me. The defense has been very spotty, very up and down this year. They've had a couple great performances, a couple of not-so-great performances. I'm looking at the Baltimore game. But they're still a top 5 team. Anytime you have Josh Allen, that's just kind of what you're going to be when you get a generational talent like that, and they've got him a true number 1 weapon now. Number 4, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Not a surprise they're high up on this list. Everyone was hitting the panic button when they started off 0-2. Not me. Go back and listen. Like I was saying, the second they start to use Derrick Henry, they're going to be fine. And, their coaching staff looked around and they're like, hey, we have a Hall of Fame running back on our team still in his prime. Like, I don't know. Let's just fucking try to use him maybe. And they haven't looked back ever since that moment. Ever since they've started using Derrick Henry and the way he's supposed to be used, they've been one of the best teams in the NFL. They've won 4 straight. That first game against the Chiefs, I think they gave Derrick Henry 13 touches. The Raiders game, not very many more, and they lost both those games. Ever since they started using Derrick Henry, they have been basically undefeatable. They are going to be a real problem because Lamar has never had someone like this. Even if, you still are one of those people that's like, I don't trust them in the playoffs because Lamar always plays down. Derrick Henry is going to completely change that, because if Lamar's struggling, just give it to Derrick Henry. He's going to wrecking ball for a first down. Their defense, not as dominant as last year, but still a very productive unit. The Ravens, to me, they're kind of back to what they were last year. They're really, really good. Number 3, we have Houston, sitting at a record of 5-1. They've really impressed me on like their play style. Like, they can win in many different ways, and you can do that when you have such a talented roster like Houston has. Like, I was kind of waiting for them to have that real standout dominant offensive performance, because their wins have been more like scrappy, more like closer than I thought they'd be. When I looked at their offensive personnel, I thought they were just going to be flat out crushing people going into this season, but that really hasn't been the case for them, at least for the most part. But they finally did have like their big, monstrous, crushing defeat over the Patriots. No one expected the Patriots to win that one, obviously, but really good win for them. And they've beaten some really good teams this year, including the Buffalo Bills. So for me right now, Houston's rolling. But what was the one team they lost to? At number 2, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Feels very strange to say that. The Vikings were a team, I don't care who you are, unless you're like a diehard Vikings fan, you didn't see them being this good this year. And I think it would be stupid of me to not put them this high, because they're 5-0. They've won in many different ways, and they've really crushed some great teams. It's not like they're beating up on bad teams. They've beaten the 49ers. They've beaten the Buffalo Bills. Or not the Bills, the Texans. What was the other one? I don't know. I'm too deep into this video. But I remember they had a stretch of 3 really good wins over Super Bowl contenders. It was Green Bay. That's it. They crushed the Packers. So, yeah, that's 3 playoff teams that they beat back-to-back-to-back weeks. And Sam Darnold, he had a weird game, obviously, against the Jets. They still won that one. Sam Darnold has been a strong MVP candidate to start off the year. And their defense, to me, has been just as impressive as the reemergence of Sam Darnold, because it's not like they have a ton of playmakers all over that defense, but it's been the best coached, schemed defense in the NFL this year, with Brian Flores as the helm. So, Kevin O'Connell, if you want to give him Coach of the Year, I'm not really going to argue it too much, but like I said, for me, it's Matt LaFleur for reasons I said. Yeah, the Vikings are really, really tough right now. They just do everything really at a high level at this point in time. That brings us to number 1. Really should be no surprise to anybody. That is the Kansas City Chiefs, our number 1, sitting at 5-0. It's just it's frustrating with the Chiefs, because it seems like no matter what happens, they just find a way to win games. And that's what happens when you have the best quarterback in the NFL, the best head coach in the NFL. Is despite the dramatic injuries they've had, with Isaiah Pacheco's knee blowing up. He was arguably, through the first couple weeks of the season, he was arguably their second best player. Like, Pacheco was really good. He was a really big part of this offense. He goes away. Then your best receiver by far, Rashee Rice, was starting to emerge, I think, as a top 10 receiver. He had an incredible game against the Falcons. He goes down with a season-ending injury. Yet they still just find a way to win games. They still find a way to just crush other teams. Their defense has been really good still. I don't know. I mean, it's the Chiefs. I don't know what exactly, like, how they're doing this, but it's Mahomes and Reed. Like, it shouldn't really come as a surprise that the Chiefs are doing this. I don't think anyone's surprised. They're the best team in football. They have been for years, and it's just going to continue. But that has been me ranking every NFL team based off the first 6 weeks of the NFL season. So I don't know if anyone made it this far in the video. If you did, I really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.